On?
I'm here.
What's up, boy?
Hey, brother.
How are you?
Hi.
You in New York or LA?
Man, I'm in Seattle. Uh,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Have you been out in the streets with those folks? Or
yeah, man. Seattle police are, you know, they're as hunkered down as military style as you get, and Tacoma, which is about 45 minutes away, they killed that brother last week.
Mm.
This area isn't really part of the national conversation, but it's got very aggressive policing here, and then a lot of white activists who get out, and pockets of black communities.
yeah, I saw Trump mention something today about Seattle, but
Mm-hmm. Give me 1 second, y'all. I'm sorry.
yeah.
I'm just gonna get this Instagram started. It's moving a little bit slow, but once it's rolling, we should be good. Yep, I think we're good. Yeah, bet. All right. Everybody ready?
We're ready here.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to our forum this evening. We're entitling this Holla, Who Hears It When a Black Man Screams? And we've got a pretty esteemed panel here with us on tonight, and we're glad that all of you were able to join us. We want to begin, first of all, by hearing a few words from our sponsors, so to speak, as this is streaming on Facebook at the site of one of our historical institutions, the Afro News. And if you have a minute, let friends and loved ones know that we are here. And so we're going to first hear from the publisher of the Afro News. Well, first of all, my name is Reverend Mark Thompson. And I say that because it was actually this current publisher's mother who gave me my first job in journalism when I came to Washington, D.C. to go to college at the Washington Afro-American newspaper. This is also the 25th anniversary of the Million Man March, and this publisher's mom was also the treasurer for the Million Man March. God bless her, Frances Murphy. Her daughter is now the publisher of the Afro. Let's have a few opening words and welcoming words from Frances Tony Draper, if we could, please. God bless you, Dr. Draper.
God bless you too, Reverend Mark, and God bless everybody. We're so glad that you are joining us tonight for this very important dialogue and discussion entitled Holla, What Happens When a Black Man Screams. Black men and black women have been screaming for centuries. And so this is going to be an important discussion. It is indeed an esteemed panel on tonight, and we are looking forward. We are glad to host you. The Afro has been at the forefront for nearly 128 years. But as we say, we are still here, and we're celebrating African American achievements, and also celebrating those things, or really not celebrating everything, but pushing for the changes that need to be made. And so we're at a pivotal time in our history. And so we're glad that you logged on tonight. Would you do us a favor? Would you like this broadcast right now? Just take a minute and like it. It won't take long. And then share it, or start a watch party if you're watching from Facebook. We want to engage with you tonight. And so, again, thank you for joining us, and we're looking forward to a stimulating conversation.
Amen. Well, thank you, Dr. Draper, and God bless the Afro folks, especially at a time like this. We're going to talk about who hears it when a black man screams. we have to also very seriously consider whether or not we hear ourselves at all if we are not supporting the black press. We ought to support the black press. We have a duty to do so. There's a wealth of information that we'll miss otherwise. So if we want to hear one another at all, we've got to support the black press. So again, Afro-American Newspapers is where we are on Facebook Live, and follow them, website, all of that, if you would, please. So now, I want to introduce our panelists, the ones that we have, and I know one of them has an abbreviated amount of time on tonight. But I want to go through and introduce the ones we do have. First of all, our brother, whom we often see on CNN, attorney, political commentator. He's run for office as well and held office. But he's rolling right now with his New York Times best-selling book, My Vanishing Country. Bakari Sellers with us, also known as Teddy Pendergrass. Always everybody talking about this beard he has right now, so we'll get into that. Also here with us is the president and chief executive officer of Harper Bank Shares Corporation and its principal subsidiary, the Harper Bank of Maryland, a Baltimore, Maryland-based minority depository institution and community development financial institution. Brother John Lewis is also here with us as well. Welcome, Brother Lewis. Also here with us is award-winning actor, best-selling author, and philanthropist. He starred on the CBS drama CSI New York for 9 years, followed by Covert Affairs, Limitless. He founded the Manifest Your Destiny Foundation, which is dedicated to empowering underserved youth through mentorship, scholarship, and grant programs. Hill Harper is here. Good to see Brother Hill again as well. We'll be joined by Pastor Jamal Bryant. I'll hold his intro until he arrives. But the person who's really kind of convened us all is our brother who is a strategist, entrepreneur, and activist who has been working at the forefront of the struggle for freedom, justice, and equality his entire adult life. Zach McDaniels' influence spans the political, business, entertainment, and social justice sectors. He's been nicknamed, we've all called him the strategist ever since we've known him, and he's the owner of Graham Avenue Strategies, a strategic advisory firm, and is chairman of the board of Philanthropic, and a proud resident of Baltimore City, where he resides with his wife, Andrea McDaniels. Zach and I almost grew up together in the movement, going back to the NAACP and the Million Man March 25 years ago. Zach is still the same age he was 25 years ago. Unfortunately, I am not. Amen. But we appreciate our brother. And why don't we begin this way, and just, Zach, also have you give us a few opening words about why this forum and why you brought this together.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Mark, for taking time out of your schedule to convene us and to move this conversation along. I also want to thank Dr. Draper and the Afro-American Newspapers. I thought it was important for us to have this conversation about our community with our community. And so Dr. Draper and her staff were courteous enough to give us this platform. But I wanted to have a public conversation about many of the things that all of us have been having conversations about privately. And that is, there's a lot facing black men in this country today. When you look at all these police murders, the murders of William Green, Ahmaud Arbery, and now our brother George, couple that with the pandemic and the health-related issues that have made us a little bit more apt to get this virus than anybody else, the economic loss of jobs, not being able to get PPP loans, African-American businesses are 40% more likely to close than any other business. So that all of these issues have created a tremendous amount of stress among brothers. And so as I was having these conversations, like I'm sure all of you guys were having, it dawned upon me that we needed to speak to that. We needed to give voice to this conversation that we're having privately. And so as you mentioned in the intro, Mark, 25 years ago, you and I and others were in the streets organizing men to come to Washington, D.C. We were coming off the heels of Rodney King and all these other issues that converged to bring us together. And here we are 25 years later having the same conversation. And so I wanted us to start a conversation that we can have here and that we can have in our community when we talk about these issues, because I'm at the age now where I'm tired of talking, and I want us to get it off our chest, but to really then start to hone in on what is it we can do different. I'm so proud of these young people that are in the streets. Yeah. I'm so proud. I do everything I can do to support them. I'm sure you guys as well. And they've lit in me a renewed interest, a renewed vigor, because quite frankly, Mark, I think all of us have become a little bit too comfortable with white supremacy and racism. And it's time to shake things up a little bit. All
right. Thank you, Zach. Well, who hears when a black man screams? I mean, let's give each of these brothers, if each of you, an opportunity to scream a little bit, and share your thoughts just as an opening, just how you feeling about what's happening right now, how it's affecting you, what's going through your mind, what frustrations and motivations are there. And so to get things going, let's begin with Brother Bakari. And I know, Bakari, you've got to bounce to the top of the hour to do CNN. But Bakari, let's start with you. What about this whole ordeal is making you scream right now and really hitting you? And congratulations on the book too, brother. Bakari, unmute yourself.
I said thank you. I'm just trying to be like Harper when I grow up. That's my goal. Aren't we all? First, let me just say thank you. Thank you to you, Mark, and John and Hill, but even more importantly, thank you to Zach. Zach is a friend of mine, and we've been friends for a long period of time. And I think that Zach exemplifies something that people take for granted, which is someone who's always on a journey for those words like justice and truth, someone who uplifts their brother, and someone, no matter what the circumstances are, always thinks about someone else. And so thank you for your selflessness, Zach. And I'm sorry I won't be able to be here with you guys, the entire time. This was an event I had circled because I like to be talking about black men with black men to black men. I think that's an important discussion. I'm going to be extremely brief because, for me, I come from, and my frame of reference is one from the civil rights movement. I'm a child of the movement. Right. And the frustrating part, you asked me, Mark, what makes me scream is this. It's quite simple. 52 years ago, my father was shot by law enforcement. 52 years ago, Henry Smith, Samuel Hammond, and Delano Middleton were killed. My father was shot with 28 others in what's called the Orangeburg Massacre. People don't know about Orangeburg. We know about Kent because white kids were killed. We know about Jackson a little bit, right, but people don't know what happened at South Carolina State, at what the history books call the last vestige of discrimination, Jim Crow's final hiding place. My father got started because of Emmett Till. You think about Emmett Till, you think about Jimmy Lee Jackson, you think about the 4 little girls in the 16th Street Baptist Church, you think about the Orangeburg Massacre, and fast forward to his son, me, sitting here before you today. And for me, it's Trayvon, it's Eric, it's Alton, it's Brianna, it's Sandra, it's Ahmad, it's Keith Lamont, it's Walter. I stood in front of a church with my dad, and this is where I'll wrap up, just because, what makes me scream, I don't have to have a long diatribe to tell you. 5 years ago, this month, I stood in front of Mother Emanuel AME Church with my father. And I said that at that time, my father was 70, now he's 75. I was 30, now I'm 35. But we have many of the same shared experiences, and it should not be that way. I am... you hear them in the background. I have 17-month-old twins. I have a 15-year-old daughter. And for black men in particular, but black people in this country, it is violence, it's imagery, it's grief, it's pain, it's streets, it's celebration of life, and then we repeat the cycle. To be black and to be a black man in this country is to be in a perpetual state of grieving. And that's what makes me scream. Because for my children, I feel like we have to break that perpetual state of grieving.
Yeah, yeah. I want to stay with you a minute because I know your time is tight. Are we as black men, as much anguish as it causes us, are we doing enough, Bakari, to address it, to stop it in whatever sphere of life we're involved in, be it politics or manhood, fatherhood?
No.
Is there a sense of helplessness?
No, we're not doing enough. And and a lot of it has to do with the fact that us bourgeois Negroes, us that are on this camera, and us that, we're representative thereof, are not meeting our brothers where they are. We're not having conversations in barbershops. We're not going to places where our brothers are. We're not messaging in these areas that should be messaged. We are not, I go to the fact 13% of black men voted for Donald Trump in 2016. That's not something I make up. That's a fact, right, Mark? We talk about this often.
Right.
And we talk about the reason why. And we have to begin to have conversations with other black men, engaging them in this process. 4 million people voted for Barack Obama in 2012. They did not show up in 2016. Of those 4 million, over a third were black. That's 1.3. It's really closer to 1.5 were African American. Over half of that 1.5 were African American males. So you're talking about 750, 800,000 black men who voted for Barack, but who did not show up for Hillary Clinton. And we have to ask ourselves why. We literally have to ask ourselves why. And it's because we're not doing enough. And I know that's a challenge. And I know people will be like, well, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. We're not doing enough. Bakari Sellers, who's on CNN, is not doing enough. John, who is a banker, who is doing great work as a CEO, is not doing enough. Hill's doing a lot, but Hill, we can do more. Zach, we can do more. And so what I'm telling people today is I want to challenge everyone to be better than we were yesterday, and to do that much more to lift up our brother by doing something extremely simple, being empathetic and actually communicating with people who look like us. Yeah. I think we can make it a long way by doing that. And I'm gonna be here. Don't worry about me leaving. When I dip out, I'll dip out. But I really want to hear what Hill and Don have to say about these comments.
All right. Let's go next to Hill Harper. Peace, brother. Again, good to see you. Again, I just think it's important because we want this to be a candid conversation about how this is affecting each and every one of us and the pressures around it. What are you thinking these days? First of all, and I should have asked Bakari as well. Bakari, you and your family, everybody's okay in this pandemic? Because I mean, we're dealing with a police demic and a pandemic. Bakari, everybody's healthy and safe.
Kick me out the house, but I'm doing all right. Other than she want to get rid of me sometimes. I'm doing good. Other than that,
and the family feels okay. Nobody's been touched by this thing. Okay, that's good. That's good. Brother Hill, how about you, man? How about you and your loved ones? You all healthy and safe in this pandemic?
I want to echo Bakari real quick, and he mentioned the word empathy, and part of I think the conversation we have to have when we're, particularly when it's black men talking to and with black men, is we have to encourage each other to be vulnerable, because part of, I think, what creates a disconnect oftentimes is the fact that we've had to put, as black men, so many shells and walls up just to get through, that even when we're talking with ourselves, we are carrying that armor with us, and it's very difficult for us to put it down, to be vulnerable and allow each other to be vulnerable and figure out ways and connective tissue to be synergistically supportive. So I completely agree with Bakari. As far as my family goes, my son is 4 years old. In the effort of being just completely transparent and honest, he's in one of the few schools. The reason why I'm here in Seattle is that there's a school here that's open. And I came here to put him in this school early because so he's in school. Teacher tells me yesterday that he said he wanted to kill people. 4 years old. and then took him off to the side, and then he was talking about killing black and brown people and things like this. So you have to understand that he's seeing some things that's Black Lives Matter, and however he's processing this in his head, he's hearing about people getting killed, and however he's processing things, these are things that we forget, that subconsciously as black men from the time that we're 4 years old, 2 years old, 1 year old in the womb, we're getting hit and bombarded about imagery and things that have to do with our value or lack thereof. And we have to be cognizant of how this gets into our subconscious and it feeds into our behavior and how we interact with each other. And that's as transparent, as honest as I can be. My father was a psychiatrist. He's passed away. He was doing work with folks coming out of incarceration. He started this thing called Harper Medical, which was a conditional release program for nonviolent drug offenders. This is way before the new Jim Crow came out. You know what I'm saying? This is you know, late 90s, early 2000s when he was doing this work. And if you want to talk about what makes me want to holler is the fact that he's long since left this earth, but the work he was doing, it's as bad, if not worse, than then. And so it speaks to Bakari's point about, I'm frustrated with me. I got multiple foundations, I got multiple empowerment books, I got all this other stuff. So been trying to do the work, but where's the results? And if we can't get the results, then it doesn't mean shit. Yeah. And so we got 61% of black people living in poverty or in extreme low income. Okay, we already know we can lay a graph over any community. You know, Zach, you're in Baltimore. You know, we got last time I checked Baltimore City, about 67-70% dropout rate of young black males. What's the incarceration rate in Baltimore City of young black males? Same percentage. We can go city to city, look at the dropout rate, look at the incarceration rate of young black men. It's the same thing. And even the fact that I can sit here on a Zoom and the words come out of my mouth that there's a 67 to 70% dropout rate of young black men, and people now say, whoa, that can't even be true. We've normalized systemic, endemic racism. We've normalized all of this. And that's what obviously gets me animated and upset. And I feel like this is a safe space, so I can just speak very candidly with brothers, because no one wants to hear BS and political speak and all that. People just want to have a real conversation about solutions. And Bakari's absolutely right. It's time for us. Whatever we've been doing, we got to do it a different way. Whatever I've been doing, I got to change it up, because I've been doing it a long time and I'm not getting the results that I need to have.
Your son, brother. I mean, you put that out there. What's going on? How is he now?
He's fine. I mean, you know, he has these spurts of anger, and he's getting very angry. But then, you know, I mean, right now he's running around having a great time. So there are obviously conversations. I took him to get a burger yesterday, and started telling him about what makes me angry and what makes me sad, so he could feel comfortable. Because he also told the teacher, "Don't tell my dad; he'll be mad." So, so for me, I clearly have to do a better job of giving him permission to speak to me, you know, directly about what makes him angry and sad. So that is part of any conversation. So you know, for me, the best way I know how to do that is to express my sadness and anger and say, you know, what made me angry and sad is this or that or the other thing. And then hopefully get some permission to say, hey man, what makes you angry and sad? You know, Daddy loves you. You can tell me anything. We can have our own secrets. You know, that kind of thing.
What's interesting, the difference age has when you say your son's 4, right?
Yeah.
When we age, there's certain things that we learn to keep bottled up. But when a child says it, they haven't been societized, so to speak, for lack of a better word, to keep it bottled up. So your son is expressing probably what a lot of folk feel in this space of frustration and anger. But we're not going to say it out loud because somebody do something to us. But for him to say it, it's really no different from what a lot of grown men feel and just don't say it. You know,
Great.
that's deep. That's deep. Well, God bless him. Praying for him and for you.
Thank you.
We'll come back to you too, John. My brother, what's happening? What's making you holler right now, John Lewis?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me here, Zach. Thank you for creating this space. You know, as I hear Hill and Bakari talk about themselves in the moment, you know, as you'd expect, you know, in this safe space, that's a feeling that we all have. Frankly, emotionally tired. I'm energized by the moment and the opportunity and the work that needs to be done, but tired. In Baltimore, of course, we had the Freddie Gray events of 5 years ago, right? In that moment, you know, we broke out our Baldwin, we read My Dungeon Shook, we listened to Where Do We Go From Here from MLK. That's 1967. We can go back to Du Bois at the turn of the century. As has been said, the tiring aspect of this is as much as we believe that we've progressed, as much as we should have progressed, as much effort has been put into progress, as much as we feel like we've seen progress, we still continue to have these moments. And what it continues to reflect is that what we are up against in this struggle is structural. It's systems that are meant to do certain things, to create certain situations, to entrench those situations that don't change without some intentional effort and some real will to change those things. As Hill mentioned, you know, I've got an 8-year-old son. You know, I believe that kids should be able to be kids as long as they should be kids. You know, there's no reason for my kid to have to carry the weight of watching somebody be murdered or have to understand why and how that happens in a civilized society. You know, the conversation that I had with my son, he had been driving with my wife and saw a Black Lives Matter sign. And she said, hey, when you get home, you can talk to your father about it. And my conversation with him was simple. I said, so what did you see? He said, I saw a sign that said Black Lives Matter Day. I said, okay, so what does that mean to you? He said, I don't know. I said, does your life matter? He said, yes. Does your mother's life matter? I said, yes. I said, does your sister's life matter? I said, yes. I said, does my life matter? I said, yes. I said, do your grandparents' lives matter? He said, yes. And I said, so take that. You understand that Black lives matter. There's nothing wrong with you. The thing that is wrong is with people who don't understand Black lives matter. And go. And at some point we will have a deeper conversation about it, but it is tiring to be in a situation where we are what should be a great society that has progressed, that we continue to struggle with the same issues.
Yeah. These children, y'all, and at the time we probably didn't realize our parents were going through some of the same things. Zach, my brother, I mean, you introduced yourself and us and kind of brought us together. What's making you want to holler right now? And you were directly involved, I know, in the Freddie Gray situation. It just seems like deja vu again, doesn't it?
It's you know, it's part of my strategic advisory firm. I'm affiliated with the Murphy Law Firm. And so Freddie Gray, George Floyd, we have hundreds of those cases all over the country. You know, cases from LA to Memphis, from Memphis to Nashville, Louisville, New York, New Jersey. I'm tired of seeing those cases come in and trying to help Billy and Hassan figure out how to navigate the worlds of government and so forth. It's tiring, Mark. I think that the thread that you get from all that's been said so far is that it wears on the body. You know, I was watching TV earlier this week and I saw the professor from Harvard University, I think his name was Dr. David Williams, talked about the amount of stress that black men carry and how that impact our health outcomes. And I was having this conversation with a friend of mine of European descent who really couldn't put his head around what that means, what it means when you're driving and that police car comes up and you see it in your rearview mirror, what that moment means for you. When you get on the airplane and you're in first class and the stewardess walks by everybody and says, "Where's your ticket?" But the small things, these my sister-in-law calls them microaggressions. These small things that add up on a daily basis that you think about, or when you, like many of my friends, ran to the website to fill out their information for their PPP loans and trying to keep their businesses alive, and the larger banks just overlooked them, and they were struggling to figure out how to make ends meet. Those kind of things, I think, impact our quality of life, and those are the things that are making me holler. It's enough just trying to navigate the world on its own, but when you have that extra barrier, that extra stress of having to work through this racist paradigm, it really wears on you. I mean, we're taught from a young age, right? We got to be twice as better than them, right? We can't do everything that they do. We're these limitations are placed on us, and we spend our whole lives trying to be perfect or perfect those things, and go over and above so that we won't get caught up in this racism matrix. And I think those are the things that are finally just like really, making everybody scream. And as we have these conversations, one of the things that I heard one of the young women say on TV during the protests is like, it's just not acceptable. And we've gotten to the point, Hill and Bakari, John and Mark, that we've kind of learned how to navigate around this racism. We've learned how to, how to make it work where we need it to work. And we fight it every day. I mean, in everything we do, we fight it every day. But I think it's come to a point, what Clarence Mitchell III used to say is, our insult level is not high enough. Our insult level and what we do about that, we've become more accommodating than we should at this point. Yeah. And I think what reminds me about these young people, like our generation or our parents' generation or our grandparents' generation, they're not having it. And that energy is really, is where I'm at.
Yeah. Is it, Brother Hill, you talked about your dad as a clinician, God bless him, and you focused a lot on our state of mind as black men. You've also focused on brothers who've been incarcerated. Picking up on what Zach said, it's almost as if our generation has had no choice but to participate, and I'm making this word up, it's not a clinical word, but if I were to just be a layperson thinking about it, sort of a functional, emotional repression. We just got to keep going, even though these things keep happening, one after the other. In our lifetime, there have been a dozen Emmett Tills, and some sisters as well. But unfortunately, isn't it true that usually we can't holler? We have to just keep going, don't we?
Yeah, well, I talked about all that armor that we have, black men, put up, and it's very difficult for us to take it down, even when we're talking with ourselves, to be vulnerable. Ultimately, to your point, I guess the best way I can put it is I say, we've been played, right? We got played. Mm-hmm. What do I mean by that? What I mean by it is that we bought into the idea that if, like Zach said, if you're twice as good as, or you can rap really well, or bounce a ball really well, or act well, or preach really well, or run a business really well, then a few of you will get to enjoy the spoils of that. And while your group is looking at you enjoying the spoils and aspiring to say, well, that can be me, the systems and institutions in place are designed and structured to make sure there's only a few that are out there that make people think that there's some type of meritocratic idea, which just isn't true.
Yeah.
So part of the work, and I mean, but see, the problem is everything I'm talking about. We can go back to W.B. Du Bois said the same thing. Frederick Douglass said, in other words, this isn't new. The idea is we have to restructure, reform, or close in and say, I'm just going to circulate dollars with John's Bank and other black banks. I'm just going to circulate dollars within the church system, and then and allow the church system to then go and build, or with Zach's company. But instead, what happens is we get comfortable and then get played, and then you end up with every actor in Hollywood having white agents and working with an agency. There is no major black agency, which should blow people's mind, right? Because you say to yourself, wow, there's so many, there's so much black talent on the singing side, on the acting side, all this, and there's not one. There's barely a black agent at a major agency. So that's just a microcosm example of how we've gotten played. The money, when it comes to our hands, leaves our community immediately or never gets there. And then when some people step out too far, there's a whole infrastructure designed to try to tear you down. You do one little thing here or there, they're going to try to ruin legacy, because they know that, hey, let me pull them back, because this is our opportunity to do that. So part of that work that we really have to do is look back inward and say, what stages of this game have I been played, and how can I start to rework this blueprint to be the active architect of my life and my community, to actually create new structures with new people, and figure out ways to support each other as black men. Not do the whole crabs in a barrel, like I'm going to be the one. I'm going to make sure I'm the guy that gets that speaking engagement. I'm going to make sure I'm the guy that gets that deal with McDaniels. I'm going to make sure I'm the guy that's that. Rather than say, you know what, I don't even need that deal. I don't need that engagement. I need to actually partner with this group and create our own lane. And I know we talk about doing that all the time, but we really have to figure out how, every brother on here right now, I want to do something with you. I want to support you. And Zach calls me, says, hey man, show up at this time. The answer is yes. And if he calls me tomorrow and say, I need you to show up tomorrow at this time, the answer is going to be yes. Yeah. And that's the mentality that I think I have to maintain and continue. Yeah, yeah. I hope I'm making sense. You're making perfect sense, because at the end of the day, when we're besieged by this violence and lynching, we want to deal with that directly, and it's almost impossible. But we deal with it by doing the things you're saying on the front end, by supporting one another. Sometimes we compartmentalize it. So I agree, you're making perfect sense to me. How are we going to help and promote each other rather than compete with each other? That's people may not see that in the immediate. Somebody just killed somebody, but those things are still important before, during, and after that we stand beside each other as black men. We are joined now by our brother Jamal Bryant, who left his home of Baltimore to go down to Atlanta and keep on building one of the largest churches that we have. We'll get into that too, because this is affecting our churches disproportionately. The church is probably never going to be the same in terms of gathering and whatnot. But first of all, Brother Jamal, welcome again. Good to see you, brother. We're also being kind of vulnerable here, Jamal. For those of us who are preachers, we get very little opportunity to be vulnerable, because we have to be there to speak to and counsel and be strong for parishioners and whatnot. So I want to begin, brother, with you. We opened up by each of us just sharing, what's making us holler right now.
and how all of this is impacting us, all of this lynching and violence, this police demic and this pandemic. What's making you holler right now, Jamal?
First, let me say good evening to all the brothers and how grateful I am to be a part and extend my heartfelt apologies for being late. I am really, Mark, contending with undocumented PTSD of active. I was in Zach, downtown Atlanta, marching with the protesters about George Floyd. And in the middle of downtown, in the middle of this protest, they are marching for George Floyd, and I yell out Freddie Gray. Because my mind immediately went back to Baltimore, that I was reliving it. And so for many people in Atlanta, this was their first time, but I'm not new to the rodeo, and I was seeing snapshots and flashes of what it is that we endured right in our own city with very little victories. To see Black people, John, have to decide whether they would put their life on the line to fight for justice and ignore the CDC and the World Health Organization, throw surgical masks to the wind, and say, I'd rather live free than die sick. The Black people are having to contend with two different pandemics at the exact same time. We've got layers of trauma. The layers of trauma, I'm getting on late with you all, having to do a Zoom for Harper, all of the incoming Black students of Duke University who are dealing with stress because they don't know whether they're going in August or when school is going to start. And I had to wrap my mind around the place, Mark, of the trauma of the class of 2020. That this class of 2020, nobody is putting in the algorithm that they were born during 9/11. So they were born in a national crisis, and then the next seminal moment of their life is obstructed by national calamity. And so Joy Drury has an incredible book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, that we inherit the scars of our ancestors, and I think that we're seeing that play out. And so those of us who are in clergy, in Cirque du Soleil, of trying to figure out how to be high tech and high touch, of trying to make that connection while being apart. That we're, for the very first time, the rubric for ministry is not footprints, but fingertips. So you're seeing everything online. So that's bringing us to another place. I am still dizzied at the fact that 73% of Black churches don't have the capacity for online giving. The New York Times said that a third of Black churches will not survive the pandemic. So you're talking about the vulnerability. How many pastors are now contending with depression and entertaining thoughts of suicide? Because it's not punishment for a sin that you've done. You are a casualty of the era in which you are living. And so there's so many different levels of compounded pain that we're having to navigate and having to move forward in.
Yeah. Well put, brother, and real. And again, always good to see you. Brother John, I want to come back to you. Jamal even alluded to a little of this, and you brought up Freddie Gray. I mean, y'all, we really don't know at what point in our lives, it's really going to hit each of us. Because we have seen a lot just in our lives. I mean, with all of these lynchings. John, you mentioned Freddie Gray. I want to ask you to talk about how, this is impacting you again. What trauma you may feel from that. And then talk about the trauma of economics. I mean, we know how our churches and businesses are suffering. But for those of us who ain't even thought about no church and no business, loss of jobs, loss of income. So we have to deal with the trauma of this as Black men and Black families. And most of us have lost our jobs and lost our source of income as well. So you're dealing with death and financial destitution. So John, if you could address all that, please.
Sure. So, personally, with trauma, where George Floyd particularly hit home, right, is when you hear people talk about George Floyd, right? When you hear them talk about, George Floyd, was a high school basketball star and a tight end, and people talk about how good of a friend he was, right? And you hear about the nature, and you hear about his life and his impact. You hear about his singing, you hear about him in his church. George Floyd reminds you of your boy, right? Like we all know George Floyd. We all have some of him in us, right? So to feel that, right, and then see that is traumatic and it's powerful. And honestly, I mean, there's a bit of this that all of us as Black men, I don't think we unpack. I don't think we can. I think there's too much of it, right? But George Floyd is close to all of us because he was and is us. I mean, we see ourselves in him. When we talk about the economic impact of this is a situation where African Americans were already far behind economically by so many measures, right? There had been a running dialogue about the wealth gap for at least the last 3 or 4 years. Just a number of challenges across whatever social measure you want to get to. African Americans were behind with respect to earnings, with respect to wealth, with respect to home ownership, with respect to being insured, with respect to participating fully in the economics and the opportunity of this country. So when we relate that to the experience with Freddie Gray here, what we saw after that was that there was this rush for philanthropy and corporations and municipalities to try to be helpful. And in the final diagnosis 5 years on, most of those things went away after a year or a year and a half. And truly there was very little that stayed. And certainly there were no institutions that lasted, that got built out of it, right? And it is really one of the real concerns in this moment. When we see the federal government announce $2.3 trillion in stimulus, let's just be anecdotal about it. Do you know anybody whose hands that ended up in? And if you added it all, would it be material, right? And in this moment after George Floyd, we see, everything on TV, these Black Lives Matter commercials. We see, corporation after corporation announcing that they're committing hundreds of millions of dollars to African Americans. And you still have to ask yourself the question, if there are billions of dollars that are going to be allocated to African Americans, where is it going? Mm-hmm. You can go to any city and look at the for-profit institutions that can accept over $50 million. And I don't know which city you would go to that would have more than 20. And many of them have less than 5, right? Mm-hmm. So you still get to the point when we talk about economic development in this country, we've been stifled from just the fundamental basis to be able to participate economically. And that's at an institutional level, but it also is at a community and individual level. And that's where I get to, we're having this cyclical discussion, but because we're talking about what I can do and what you can do, what Hill can do, what Zach can do, and what Reverend Bryant can do. But there's a piece of this that is really systemic, that can only be affected by policy that is reparative, that is looking to solve issues and change structures that ensure that things don't inure to our community, right? When we talk about poverty in general, poverty is expensive. Mm-hmm. And poor communities pay more for everything, right? They pay for health care. They pay rental expenses. Jails are built, and incarceration in the prison industrial complex benefits from these things. Those dollars do not inure to our community. They do not inure to growth. They do not inure to small businesses. And those things are things that can only come about through political action, through voting, through making sure that we take care of filling out the forms for the census, making sure that the right people get elected nationally and locally, making sure that political platforms include the things that directly affect our communities. I mean, we can look at political platforms now, and I would struggle for anybody to tell me specifically in any of those which are for Black people, which are for Black men. And until we start doing those things and asking those questions, we will continue to be at the same place. There are things that you ask for, and there are things that you demand. We have to demand that this country stop killing Black men, that it stops being acceptable. That's not an ask. That's not an action. That is a demand. There are things that are foundational to our inclusion. There are things that are foundational to our full citizenship. And those are the things that we have to work towards to be able to see any measure of real change happen.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Zach, this, you asked a question in this panel, who hears when a Black man screams? But we know that, we've seen Black children and Black women affected by all this going on, and even some of them have been lynched by police and armed vigilantes. Brother, we go back to Million Man March, and a handful, not many, most of our sisters supported us, but some of our sisters said, why y'all just having something for the men? Address, if you would, as a Black man, how being a man, it's innate to want to protect Black women and Black children. Not that Black women don't want to protect Black men, but if we're talking about Black men today, what it does to our trauma and our manhood when we can't even defend a Sandra Bland or Breonna Taylor, or a child like a Tamir Rice and a Trayvon Martin. Just that part of this process is also the infantilization and emasculation of us as men and what is supposed to be natural for us. We should be able to defend one another.
It's I think our sisters understand, but they really don't understand. I'll give you an example. Last week, the alarm went off in my house downstairs in the basement, and my wife, her first instinct was to run downstairs, and I stopped her and I said, "Baby, let me go down there." And she said, "Why?" Our natural instinct is to be protective, and so when we see, in any way, shape, or form, Black women marginalized, that does something to us internally, or their security or their health put in any kind of jeopardy. That does something mentally to most brothers that I know. And some brothers are afraid to say certain things now, because if you say them, you can be categorized as not being sensitive enough, right? And so we find ourselves gauging our masculinity based on how sensitive we can be. As Reverend Bryant would say, I know I'm stepping on some toes right now, but the reality of it is that's who we are. That our natural instinct is to be a provider and protector. That's how we were trained. That's how we were raised. That's the expectation that was set up. At least in my family, I was raised by a Southern Baptist preacher, fire and brimstone preacher, and so it was drilled into me early on. And you take care of your mother, you take care of your sisters, you look out for your cousins, you make sure that the women around you are taken care of. And so, I'm proud that my wife is successful in her own right. She has her own voice, but I'm not going to be in any way, shape, or form satisfied if I'm not there to make sure that she's okay. And I think when we see Black women shot, maimed, hurt, that also does something to our psyche that most people won't understand. We've had a history in this country where, going back to slavery, where we had to sit and watch our women abused, raped, and all of that is passed down from generation to generation, and it's almost in our DNA. And I think a lot of that pain and frustration we act out on that in different ways when we can't provide. And a lot of brothers, you know, deal with this when they have a loss of income or a loss of job. You know, that insecurity that you feel that you can't provide for your wife or your family, it does something to you. And I think in talking to some brothers who are going through that within the last month or so, you know, I don't think most people can really appreciate and process that. I mean, I'm sure, you know, other men experience that, but coming from our community and what we've had to endure and what that means to us is a lot different than what it means to others because we've had to be subjugated for so long.
Thank you, Zach. Brother Hill, I think really we do well to hear more from you about, or some advice even, about what, you know, the average brother listening can say to his children, his son or daughter. I wonder too, you know, when James Baldwin went down to Atlanta to cover the child murders, you know, he was very candid in saying that a lot of times our children and their success or failure, I'm paraphrasing, is wrapped up in what they see in us as parents and as men. And when they see us unable to save them, you know, we all know that moment when that childhood innocence leaves, and it's almost a tragic moment for a black child, you know, and then they see us, and it's not that they resent us, but they realize, wow, my parent, my father cannot alone change the conditions in which I find myself. So as a child or as a young man or a young woman, I have to kind of step out here and figure out a way to make it. And then they become us. So the cycle repeats itself. The trauma, the challenges, and almost the helplessness, the repression of that trauma. And most times, you know, people want to know, well, what do we say to our children? There's also this myth. I think it's kind of mythical in the black community. I always say, and white folks are saying it more like they know what we're doing. You know, black parents have to have the talk. I mean, I know we have to have this talk, but I've never really gotten the full script. I don't even know if I know the exact words to say in the talk. And then as soon as you come up with something to say, something else happens. You have you talking to your child about Ahmaud Arbery one day, and the next day you got to talk about Breonna Taylor. And then the day after that, you got to talk about George Floyd. So, but Brother Hill, I mean, I think people have a lot of regard, and even in you always having the courage to share your vulnerability, you know, we still learn something. So the people out there listening now, brothers, what should brothers be saying to their children? Is there a talk? Is there one talk? And let me tell you something, listening right now, y'all, let's face it, we got a lot of sisters out here raising young brothers by themselves. And I'm not saying that to judge any brothers. That's just the way we know how that works too, and that's the way the system works out. That's part of it. We're traumatized, we're shunned. John, we can't get no jobs, can't keep no jobs. Most of the heads of households, even in white families now, white women are the major breadwinners. So that's already happening. So for the sisters who've got, you know, young kids and young brothers in particular, a little advice from you, brother, about what at least we can start thinking about and formulating about what to say to them. What is the talk, Hill Harper?
I'll tell you, well, you know, my son's only 4 years old, and I'll tell you that we got up very early, very early this morning, because he had been in school in New York, and that school was having their final virtual day. So the teacher was like, you know, will you guys get up early on the West Coast so all the students could say goodbye to Pierce? So I got him up real early, and we got on, and the teacher was like, everybody get your favorite stuffy. And he was like, Daddy, where's my bear? Where's my bear? And I'll tell you, I was sitting there watching him on the virtual holding his bear, and brought a tear to my eye, because our young boys don't get to be innocent and vulnerable as long as they should. They don't get to hold the stuffy until they're 8 or 9. They, you know, there's these things that happen, whether seeing Black Lives Matter signs and having discussions about George Floyd, or him feeling some kind of way because you put him in this school, you know, there's no learning going on, but then you put him in this other school, there's nobody else that looks like him, so he feels some kind of way, and then you got people saying things to him in his ear about how he's different and what does that mean. And so you're caught between trying to decide of undereducating, overeducating, messing up his head. Our kids need to be allowed, our boys need to be allowed to just be innocent and keep that stuffy, right? And that's what I'm thinking. It's like how there's a book that someone gave me, this beautiful book about young Dr. King, and I started reading it to him one time, and I realized that it kept talking about when he was a boy, there was white kids that teased him and things. And I kept saying to myself, do I want my son to start this early internalizing that there are going to be white people that start, you know, when, like you said, when is that conversation supposed to start? So I put that book to the side and I said, well, I'm going to tell you about Dr. King, but I'm not going to read this version of the book. I'm just going to tell you about a black man who's proud to be who he is, and he became a revolutionary, but not just because white kids teased him or because when he was a kid, he felt some kind of way. And so I certainly don't know the answer because I'm the most imperfect parent there is, but at least one thing I could say is let's help our young men maintain their innocence and their ability to be kids.
Yeah.
Now, I wrote the book Letters to a Young Brother for young teens because, as you just said, Rev, there's so many, 3/4 of our young men are being raised by single women, and the reach outs I would get when I'd be out and about, and I'm sure it's not different for any other man on this panel, is that young brothers very rarely want to raise their hand in the Q&A session in front of anybody, but they will grab you on the side and, hey man, can we just talk for a second? I got these goals, or I want to achieve this, and so I wrote Letters to a Young Brother to try to help just offer a playbook of that transition from young manhood into manhood for a lot of these young men who didn't have a man in them to help with that. Yeah. But all of that is inadequate, and I think about Pastor Bryant when he was in Baltimore, and I think it was very early when I was on a book tour. He allowed me to come to his church and said some nice words about me and let me sign books in the foyer of the church so that I could actually build a momentum with this book that ended up building all this momentum. And what's interesting about, we talk about institutions, that book was not going to happen because the vast majority of publishers that I pitched the book to said that I was pitching them a book for a population that doesn't read. And rather than the institution looking at itself and say, there's a whole group of young men that we're not reaching, those are potential book buyers, they actually blame the young men. Rather than saying we're not putting books out that they want to read, they don't read, right? And so we have to protect our young men. We have to protect their innocence. We have to protect each other. And then whether it's being parents and taking care of each other and asking other men to man up, as hard as that conversation is, we're basically asking white folks in the midst of this to I don't want to call it man, or maybe it's white up, I don't know, become an anti-racist. Right. Rather than saying, I don't see color. No, see the color, see the racism and do something. We have to ask our other brothers, how come you got time to hang out with me and play ball with me, but you don't have time to spend time with your kids? I don't want to play ball with you no more if you're not going to spend time with your kids. I clicked off for a second when Pastor Bryant just started talking because I heard my son screaming downstairs. I just had to go check and make sure he didn't, fall, he's all right. He was all right. But we have to raise our level of care, our level of intentionality, and and our level of demand of other Black men, as well as society at large, to what John had to say. Basically, not accepting. We can't accept it from each other, nor can we accept it from the greater white society either.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. Very well said. You know, I'd say this. My son he just turned 18 on last Sunday, and you know, living with this and having a Zoom commencement on Saturday. But one thing I'll say about his school, they read your book, Hill, and I think when he was maybe even in the 10th grade or so, and he's in the room reading the book. You know, kids are funny. And I said, you know, I know him, right? He said, no, you don't. You don't know him. but he read your book, brother, and it clearly had an impact on him, and I appreciate that. Brother Jamal, so again, I have to ask you, man, you talked about the trauma, the layers of trauma. You got a lot of brothers whom you serve as pastor, who are in your fold, man. What kind of questions are they asking you? And what are you saying to them, and what advice are you giving them at this time? And I'm sure, like y'all heard what Jamal said. He said that a third of Black churches may not survive. That means that many more Black folk support Black churches and tithe and give in Black churches, because Black churches aren't surviving. That means there's a large proportion of Black people that aren't going to survive. So what are you hearing, Jamal, and how are you tackling it?
Mark, I'm hearing ethical questions that as a pastor, I've not had to confront before, and really have put me in a prayer space that maybe Brother Lewis can help walk me through. So you look at how many of our small Black businesses never got PPE stimulus support. And questions as a pastor I had to grapple with that they asked me, Hill, that I didn't know the answer to, that what happens that Cheesecake Factory decided that they were going to pay no rent during the quarantine. So my Black business owners say, Rev, if they not paying, do I have to pay? And so, you know, those kind of questions, having to really figure out the safety measurements. Remember when this first started in March, we thought we would be back in by Easter. So we thought it was just going to be a pause, not a shift. And so to that, June is going to be, Zach, the largest amount of evictions in modern day history of those who had delayed rent or delayed mortgage, who thought it was forgiven rent, forgiven mortgage. So they're not just paying June, they're having to pay April and May. You're having to deal with the grappling of brothers who have had to ask me critical questions and say, Rev, you told me to come out the street and to get a clean job. That job is closed, but the street is still open. And I got to eat and take care of my children. And so we're having to really explore the avenues of unconventional wealth, of entrepreneurship at a whole nother level. The smack in the face of the realization of the trauma of hearing your job saying you are not essential. Just what does that mean by itself? We've called the heroes all of our doctors and nurses, and they are that. But we've given little light to those who change the bedpans, to those who are downstairs who are doing the intake in the emergency room. And so it's been a whole level. My sister is a clinical therapist in LA at Pepperdine, and I've had her do 3 in these 12 weeks. I've had her do 3 group therapy sessions for my church to just walk us through and to give some semblance and light and some understanding of how to do that balancing, acting, grounding. And it's been overwhelmingly for the reasons that you all have before mentioned, because instinctively we are to protect and to provide. and with both calamities, many men are not able to do either. And so it's really been a stretch of faith for me.
Amen. Thank you, brother. Folks, in the time remaining, and honestly, there aren't a lot of questions in the comments. If you have a quick question, please feel free to share it. There are more amens in the comments, and we appreciate that. But if you have a question for any of our esteemed panelists, feel free. John, we're going to go around with everyone. We got to talk about solutions. So we're screaming. What are we screaming in terms of solutions? John, I'll start with you. What do you suggest? What can we do? What can we as black men do together? What can we do with one another, with black women, with black families? What are some of the solutions, John? And I mean, your expertise is business and finance. So even anything along that line, which is an area that most of us don't know or understand and are more bludgeoned by and intimidated by and overwhelmed by than actually taking on. So, but from your point of view, what solutions come to mind for you, Brother John?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is that we have to have a committed long-term view to this. There is no quick solution, right? There's no silver bullet here. There is work and there's wood to be chopped for a long time until things get better, right? There is coalition building because we can't do all that needs to be done by itself. And the roots of it are 400 years old, right? And the start of the change to it is acknowledgement and some form of reconciliation in real intentional effort to make things better. And there again are any number of social dimensions that need to be addressed. Everything from food access to affordable housing to, frankly, opportunities in schools and the things that create investment in our communities so the economics of those communities can get better. I believe that all of that stuff, the preface to it is full citizenship, right? So you have got to register to vote. You have got to get everyone that you know to register to vote. And then you need to vote. You have got to ensure that you're included in the census or neighborhoods are correctly counted and the resources that should come to them. And then you have to hold people accountable, right? I guess when we talk about this cliff that we're going to see, right, we are going to see evictions pick up. We're going to see businesses start to really be challenged as PPP runs off and stimulus runs off. Everyone who gets evicted should be a voter, right? There should be someone who answers for a policy that lets them get evicted when we need housing in this moment. There should be people who have to answer for the lack of health care in the middle of a pandemic. But if we don't do those foundational things, we can't call on people to do the things that we need to have done from a policy perspective. And there really is no amount of entrepreneurship. There's no amount of pulling yourselves up by your bootstraps that is going to fill this economic need in low-income communities. Those are things that have been entrenched forever. I mean, a simple example is when we talk about this discrepancy in frontline workers during this crisis, and we say, well, what are those frontline workers, right? They're driving, they're doing healthcare and childcare. These are things that we were doing 40 years ago and 50 years ago and 100 years ago, right? They're structural things, and they speak to the lack of opportunities and the lack of intentionality in creating opportunities and pathways for economic advancement and full participation. And that's where the focus has to be. And that's not something that's going to change tomorrow, but it's something that won't change at all if we're not intentional about planting the seeds and being active in that change.
Amen. Thank you, John. Zach, solutions. What are your thoughts? What are some of the things we need to be thinking about?
You know, institution supporting our institutions. You know, John is a perfect example of doing the PPP process. Many African-American business owners, several called me, Zach, hey, I've been waitlisted, Zach, I've been denied. Pick up the phone and call John. Harper Bank took care of him. And that's a real-time, real-life example. We need to open up our accounts at Harper Bank and the black banks all over this country. You need to have an account. 2, this platform that we're on, Afro-American newspaper, we need to have a subscription to the Afro-American newspaper. That's something tangible. That's the way we get our message out into our community. Another thing, not just registering to vote, but participating in the political process after the vote is cast. It looks like in Baltimore, for the first time that I can remember, top offices in the city are going to be occupied by Black men. The comptroller's office, president, city council, and the mayor. I haven't seen that in quite some time. But with that comes a level of responsibility for those guys. So we got to hold them accountable. And those are just some of the things I think. And then supporting the Black church. Jamal and I have been friends and comrades for a long time, longer than either one of us want to probably admit. But that church, him being anchored in the church, has allowed both him, me, and others to benefit from, because the church has provided resources when we need them. The church has been, to Hill's point, an opportunity for other Black folks to make money and to introduce themselves through the church. So the church as an institution, of all the 4 historically Black colleges in Maryland, every last one of them came out of a Black church. Coppin State came out of Bethel AME. Bowie State came out of Union.
Right.
Morgan State birthed Sharp Street. And then University of Maryland Eastern Shore came out of a Black church on the Eastern Shore. The Black church has been the anchor institution for our community. Supported everything that we have, medical, newspapers. And so, we need to encourage the support of the Black church. We need to encourage our young people to tap into their spirituality, because a lot of what I think is missing is that spiritual connection to the church. And so those are just some of the things I think we can do that's tangible, that will begin to help us change this paradigm. And then lastly, I always say this: just be bold. You don't have to have all the answers, but just be bold. One thing that Mark, you and I were trained by people who believe in being bold. I mean, when you sit down with the likes of John Henry Clark and others, and they speak truth into you, you have to do something with that. Yeah. And so, we've been blessed to be mentored by these men, and we got to pass that on. And so part of what I do on a regular basis, I look at the young activists in the city, the Davon Loves and the Adam Jacksons, and I throw my arms around, and I make sure that people know that I got their back. And I think we got to do a lot of that as well.
Yeah. And seeing those young activists too. I mean, I know a lot of us want to get out in the streets with them, but some of us too old to get out there with this pandemic, risk catching something. It's like that's deep, and that's one of my traumas, because y'all know I'd be right out there in the street. Hopefully, we can get back to it. Brother Hill, I think we just saw caught a glimpse of baby boy. I think he just gave us a drive-by. Bless him. But Brother Hill, what are your thoughts? People want to hear, what are some of the solutions? What are some of the things that you think we can do?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you, just hearing everybody on here speak is very inspiring to me. So I appreciate it. And to echo what Zach just said about being bold, the one thing that we don't talk about enough, there's a saying I have that I say, you can't be free if the cost of being you is too high. And obviously there's a huge cost that we as Black men bear. Now, if we flip that on its ear, the way something I've been working on as far as attempting to be bold and try to look at solutions is looking towards technology. And John, I do believe that with the right structure and aggressive and bold use of technology and organizing, we can actually create new systems of wealth creation within our community that heretofore has not been possible, because we haven't been able to reach as many of us at the same time for a very little amount of money to actually start to bring us together. So it's a little premature for me to announce it, so because I'm not quite there yet. So I will say this: anybody who wants to potentially just get a reach out from me about what I'm working on and attempting to put together, you can DM me on Instagram, put your email in the DM. Somebody from my office will go through all those DMs and get your email, and we'll shoot you an email when it's time. So it's not quite time yet; it's close. But I want to crack the code on quadrupling the household wealth of black families, and in that process also increase the financial literacy and cross-generational wealth transfer that heretofore has not happened. We know that black families have an average household wealth of $7,000 compared to the average household wealth of a white American family of $140,000. That extreme number. And then the fact that they use technology to separate us from our brown brothers, and when our Latino and Latinx families are around 6,000 in household wealth, 6,500, we're in the same boat, yet they would have you to believe that we should be fighting each other. So creating black and brown wealth, creating black and brown cross-generational wealth transfer, creating institutions that actually support the creation of this is possible, I believe, through technological structures. I think here he comes. He's upset. Pierce, come on in here. Pierce, come here for a second. Come here for a second. What's wrong? Pierce is a little upset, fellas. These are some amazing men that I've had the chance to speak with, talking about pride, talking about achievement, and all of those great things. You want to say something to him? You upset? What are you upset about?
Because I don't get Delica doesn't let me do something.
Something you want to do? What do you want to do?
I take
now, you don't have to cry and say it. You can actually say it through your words. You can use words. You can breathe. Take a deep breath and breathe, and then say what you want.
I've been taking too long, and Angelica been rushing me.
You've been rushing me. Well, it's about dinner time. That may be why. Okay?
Hey, Pierce. What's up, brother?
Hey, come back. Reverend Thompson wants to say something to you.
How you doing, man?
Good.
You good? You sound okay. You sound good. Nice to meet you, brother. Strong young man. Okay. Take care of daddy. Take care of your parents, all right? All right, young brother. Good to see you, man. Nice to meet you.
Okay. Say nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hell yeah. Yeah. You're gonna be all right, brother. That's great. Proud of you.
Yeah. You want to stay here? So when everything that we're talking about is for him, right? Yeah. For him and those that look like him.
Yeah.
Because, it's about what we can do to so that, as we started this conversation I was talking about my father. Unfortunately, Pierce will never have the opportunity to meet his grandfather in the flesh. Mm-hmm. I can tell him stories about him, and I can tell him about mythology, but obviously we have to figure out ways to keep our men around longer. To all those health disparities, but a lot of it starts with the foundational economic realities of creating foundations in our community around healthcare, around wealth, around income, around jobs, all of the things around education, all of the things that we know are foundational. And I believe that we can do it. I believe technology allows us the ability to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, man, and thank you for sharing Pierce with us. Rem Jamal, solutions, my brother.
One is for where I am in Atlanta, and I can only imagine it's the same in Baltimore. Only 50% of Black people in Fulton and DeKalb County have filled out their census forms, which really is going to have a direct, dire impact on our community. That we would do that we would really ramp up our voter initiative. We just got the polls back from Atlanta, from Georgia's primary, and 140,000 more people voted for Trump than voted for Biden. And I keep arguing to young people that Trump didn't get elected because of all the people that voted for him. He got elected because of all the people that didn't vote at all. And so this is going to be a very critical election that we would really do some stuff, all of us in the same age division. They no longer teach civics class. And so I think it's very important for us to really instruct and teach why you can't just vote at the top of the ticket, but vote all the way down, inspect who those judges are, who the district attorney is. All of it is so important, and that we would know the law and going forward. If the critical civil rights legislation of our hour is going to be police reform. And so our young people need to be knowledgeable of what that means. The chant of defund the police, what does that really mean for us, and where do we stand in that? Knowledge is power for us.
Yeah, yeah. Amen, amen. Thank you, brother. Well, folks, we're about out of time. This has been a tremendous discussion. I'm thankful to have been a part of it. I want to thank all of the panelists, John Lewis, Reverend Jamal, Bryant, Hill Harper. We'll get a final word from Zach, Hill Harper, and Pierce. Thank you, Pierce, for joining us as well. First, though, as we mentioned, we must begin once again to go back to supporting our own institutions for those of us who do not. And we should be getting our news from black news organizations. And the Afro-American newspaper is one of our oldest institutions. So their Facebook page sponsored us tonight. Folks, even beyond this, share this conversation if you would. It'll live on Facebook. It's also on Twitter, on my Twitter at Make It Plain, and on my Instagram at Minister with 2 T's. Share it with everyone. And those of you make comments beneath, and we'll look at them, and there are things we can continue to learn from one another. But first, before Zach gives us our closing words, a few closing words from Dr. Francis Tony Draper of the Afro-American newspaper.
Thank you, Reverend Mark, and let me too thank the panelists for such a stimulating conversation. I was just really glad to hear everything that was said on tonight, and I also had a chance to go onto the Facebook platform, and there are lots of comments there to look through and lots of likes, and so to God be the glory. I wear another hat in addition to being the publisher of the Afro-American newspaper. I'm also, Jamal, a good AME Zion preacher.
Yeah.
So I want to leave us with 3 things that we can do. We talk about support our institutions, but I want to give you something tangible that you can do. Number 1, like our Facebook page, like our Instagram page. That doesn't cost you anything. You're on there anyway. Sign up for our newsletter. That doesn't cost you anything. But as you've been watching those on Facebook, you've seen a URL down the bottom of your screen, and it's directs you to a site called Give Butter. I'm going to ask that you make a tax-deductible donation there. That goes to us directly. And for any amount, we're going to give you a complimentary 6-month subscription to the Afro. And if you're so inclined to give $250 or more, we produced a beautiful 112-page magazine. Saw some comments about sisters called To the Front, Black Women and the Vote. The 19th Amendment was 100 years ago. And so this is from the Afro archives, as well as current writers who are here talking about the Black women's struggle for the vote. And so for a $250 contribution or more, you can get that book complimentary. But I can't say enough. Let's support our own institutions. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of us will say we do, but we really don't. And so I want to implore us to do that. And so thank you so much. Zach, my mother would be proud of you. I can see her smiling now. She'd be proud of all of you. And so thank you very much. And it was an honor to host you tonight. And my sisters, I saw the comments that you're making. Will Afro do something? That we would have a panel of African-American women, certainly, but this was the time for the brothers to do it, and I'm glad that they did.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. Draper. Just for institutional memory and history, when everybody hears, because a lot of people don't know, what year did the Afro American newspaper first publish?
All right, it published August of 1892. So
right.
my great-grandfather, John H. Murphy Sr., started that paper when reportedly, by who was making the report, less than 2% of the Black population could read. He was an enslaved man, served in the Civil War. He was 52 years old, had a wife and 10 children, and had the audacity and the gall to start a newspaper that he sold for 3 cents. And so here we are, nearly 128 years, big shoulders to stand upon, but we are still telling the truth and still telling folks, stop killing us.
Yeah.
We still do a print edition too. Some people will still want it in print. We still do a print edition. And we're faithful, and a shout out to the Afro team. So 1892, Reverend Mark.
So the reason I would say that is some of us didn't start calling ourselves African American until about 20 years ago. But the
Correct.
Afro was calling us Afro American back in 1892. I want everybody to be clear on that. So they were early. Some of us were late. We went from color to Negro and everything else and black and evolved. But the Afro was already there. God bless the Afro. We didn't get a lot of questions, as I said, more comments. And yes, sisters, I'm sure there'll be a conversation for you. There ought to be. I support that. There was one question that Courtney did send me. I want to do this before I let you close out, Zach. And we're going to do just a quick poll. Someone asked on the Facebook thread, do we support reparations? Yes or no, John Lewis?
Yes.
Zach?
Yes.
Jamal?
Yes.
Hill Harper?
Yes, combined with financial literacy, because if we get it and we don't have it, it'll disappear.
Amen. Pierce, did he want to vote too? You got his proxy. You voting for Pierce too? All right, that's cool. That's fine. So that's all the votes. Thank you. Again, I want to thank you all. Zachary, my brother Zach, bringing us together again. Me and this brother been in the struggle together a long time, have seen a lot, and so appreciate you for asking me to be a part of this, brother. Please, your closing remarks.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules to be a part of this conversation. But before I get into my closing, I wanted to say to Dr. Draper and the staff of the Afro, thank you so much. And to put my money where my mouth is, on behalf of the brothers, we're going to make $1,000 contribution to the Afro so that you can continue to fight for freedom, justice, and equality for our people. And then to Bakari, thank you in his absence. Bakari is a good friend and a brother who's making a lot of strides in a tough area. So I want to thank Bakari for joining us earlier. Definitely want to thank Brother John and what you guys are doing at Harper Bank. That is a great institution. Harper Bank has always been there when we call, and we try to do our best to support Harper in each and everything that they do. So Harper, people always hear me talking about support Harper. I support Harper because I see what they do. I see the work that they do. I see the impact that they have. I see the lives that they change. And so I'm a big fan of Harper Bank. So thank you, John. My brother Hill, thank you so much. Hill is always there when I call. He's always trying to adjust his schedule to make it happen for us. He's doing a lot of great work with his foundation and even with his business. He has a coffee business where he's training ex-offenders on how to make coffee and how to sell coffee. And so he's doing tremendous work. Most people just see him as an actor. He's also a lawyer. He's in Flint, Michigan, fighting the Flint water crisis. So thank you, man. Thank you for always answering the question. To my brother Jamal, there's no words to describe you, brother. I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you do. We're watching what you're doing with the COVID testing and feeding 1,000 families a week for the last 3 or 4 months. You're really doing God's work. And we appreciate you. Right? And then to Mark, Mark and I have been through a lot. in addition to being a great communicator, Mark is also a great organizer. Many people don't know Mark organized the first independent black political party to have ballot status in Washington, D.C., the Emoji Party. And that's where Mark and I met. I was out there having people sign petitions on the campus of UDC and Howard and other places to help my brother get ballot status in the city of Washington, D.C. And we're still trying to leverage that black vote. So thank you for all that you do in each and every day. On behalf of our board of philanthropic, on behalf of the Murphy firm and all of those people that support you, thank you guys for tuning in tonight. And yes, the women on my board made it clear that I have to create a forum for them. So Dr. Draper will be reaching out to back to you soon and taking a step back so the sisters can get what they need to get off their chest. Tonight, I just wanted to really start this conversation. It was based on a lot of the conversations I was having with these guys and other brothers, just expressing, a lot of what we talked about tonight. So again, I want to thank the Afro and all you guys for taking time out to be a part of this. Really do. God bless you.
You're welcome, Zach. Let me just say though, before we want to give a shout out because people ask all the time. So Billy and I both with his great grandfather and it's the same great grandfather. So yes. Shout out to the Murphy firm.
Yes. So yes, before I forget, Billy and Hassan Murphy is a part of the Afro family.
Yes.
And my other Afro connection, Dr. Draper, is that my wife was an intern in Washington Afro under Francis Murphy, and she's now the deputy editorial page editor of the Baltimore Sun. So, she has great affinity for the Afro. So I want to share that as well. But Pastor Bryant, given the situation that we're in, if you could do us all a favor and close us out with a word of prayer.
Good and gracious God, merciful Master, I pray for peace that passes all understanding, joy that is unspeakable, mercy that will endure forever, faith for the fight, and I pray that you'll give us energy for the mountain. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.